Good morning, everybody. Welcome back to Homesteading Off the Grid. Just to give you an FYI, it's raining this morning. If I don't care about getting wet, I was an infantryman, and a lot of you watching were infantrymen or still are. You know our saying, if it ain't raining, we ain't training. So it's not that I'm afraid to get wet, but I don't want the camera to get wet. So I hate to block your back view, but this is going to be for the camera. I don't want the camera to get wet. Hope it doesn't interfere with the lighting. But I'm up here in the rain early. I got up at 4:37 this morning. I usually sleep into at least 5, but I knew the rain was coming and I wanted to cover up some firewood that has been drying. And so I got up a little earlier. A lot of folks say, wow, isn't 5 o'clock earlier enough? No, because I have my day structured. I have what I do. I know what I'm going to do. I needed about 20 extra minutes to do this extra thing, so I gave myself 20 extra minutes by waking up 20 minutes early, 23 minutes earlier. And this is kind of what I want to talk about today. Loving Atlanta, a user who goes by the handle Loving Atlanta on our channel. Thanks for being here, Loving Atlanta. Made the comment yesterday, I wish I were a morning person like you. I was not always a morning person, and I'm going to tell you how I became a morning person and the lessons I learned through becoming a morning person. And it wasn't in the military. I didn't join the military until I was in my mid-30s. It was something I felt called to do at the time. We were at war in Iraq and Afghanistan, and I just felt called to do it. So I left that brokerage job I had, took a 66% pay cut because I went in as an enlisted man. I could have gone OCS because I have a bachelor's, but that wasn't my intent. I didn't want to go in and be an officer and climb the ranks. I wanted to be a boot on the ground, go in, do a deployment, come home, get out, and go on with life. And that's what I've done. But story time. I had a professor in college named Professor Baim. He was a science professor. He was one of my favorite professors, but there was a time when I hated him. And here it is, 20 years, more than 20 years later after being out of college, and I can look back and say that Professor Baim taught me some of the most important lessons about success in life, and I can't remember a thing he taught me about science. I mean, maybe some general knowledge stuff I'll remember, but I had Professor Baim for several courses, and passed them all except his easiest course that he taught. It was a general earth science course. I failed this class not only once and had to repeat it, but I failed this class twice. I had to take this class 3 times before I passed. And finally got to move forward. And this story is kind of how I became a morning person and how I learned so much about life, about being successful in life, and I'm going to share it with you. So Professor Baim, he was at the time in his mid-60s. If he's still alive, and I don't know if he is or not, he'd be in his mid to late 80s now. Every semester, first class of every semester, he gave the same speech. And the speech was so boring at the time as a 20-something, early 20s. We tuned him out, but the speech started with, everybody has the same 24 hours in a day. The difference between people who are successful and who are where they want to be in life and those who are not successful or who aren't necessarily where they want to be in life is the choice they make in regard to how they spend those 24 hours a day. And he said, how are you spending your 24 hours in a day? And he went on about how for every 1 hour worth of coursework you take in college, you need to spend 3 hours outside of the classroom studying. Well, I tuned him out more because that didn't apply to me. I'm not bragging, but I've always been smart enough to kind of go to class and just kind of show up and pass. And that's pretty much how I spent my college years. I'm not proud of that, but that's how I got through for the most part until the last year and a half or so, and it's because of something Professor Baim taught me, which is not science related. So he'd tell us, he'd say, he actually asked me, he says, Kevin, what time do you wake up? And I said, 8 o'clock. He said, why do you wake up at 8? And I said, because my first class is at 9. He said, okay. He says, you need to start waking up at 6. I'm like, why would I do that? He goes, look, that's 2 hours. 6 o'clock isn't early. And Professor Baim, ironically, was a homesteader. He had maybe 6 or 8 acres, a couple cows, some goats, and some chickens. And he got up early and he did his farming thing. Then he went and taught class all day, went home, went back to the farm. So he's talking about how I was just wasting time sleeping in. And I was like, Professor Baim, but you don't get it. I'm up till midnight partying, got all these friends, all these, his girls come by and we're drinking beer, and he's like, okay. And he said, okay, point number 2, not only do we all have 24 hours in a day and how we choose our life, he goes, look at what you're doing. Are the activities in which you're participating moving you closer to achieving your goals, or are they moving you further away from achieving your goals? Man, this stuff was so over my head at the time. So anyway, we go through, the course was so easy, I took it for granted. I didn't go to class like I should have. I never studied. And at the end of the semester, I get my grades. I failed. I got a D. And you had to have at least a C, or you had to repeat the course. It was part of my required curriculum. So I went to Professor Baim, and I was offended because I liked Professor Baim, and Professor Baim liked me. I couldn't understand why somebody didn't just give me a C because he liked me. I mean, shouldn't people just give us things that we want because they like us? This is how I thought at the time, because I had a very immature mindset. So he said, no, he says, I'm not going to give you anything. He says, look, take the class next semester. It'll be easier. You've had it before, but come to class and study. Not to prolong the story any longer than it needs to be, but same thing happened next semester. I'm waking up just in time to get to class on time. If I go, I'm partying at night. I've got all these friends and all these girls, and just, enjoying college life to its fullest, except for the whole classroom part. Lo and behold, I got a D again. Now, I was really upset with Professor Baim this time, because I thought, well, I'm going to get this guy to like me even more. I'm going to butter him up. I mean, that's how I was thinking. A very immature mindset. I've always been an avid reader, and I would trade books with Professor Baim. That second time I had his course, and I read everything. I read mostly fiction. I write fiction. But if there's something out there of real interest, like nonfiction, I'll devour books on the topic. So I was reading a lot of books on some scientific type stuff in history. I found a wonderful book called Connections. I forget the author's name. He used to have a TV show, but I don't watch TV. I only knew because I read it on the back of the book. But he has both a PhD in history and science, and he wrote about the history of science in his book Connections, and basically ties together how the internet was derived from the planting stick. Man's first major technology, the planting stick, and the thought processes behind it led to the internet. And the way he ties it together is amazing. So I gave Professor Baim this book to read, and he gave me one of his books. We were trading books. So I get a D, and I go to him again, and I said, Professor Baim, this is just too much. You failed me again. And he said, no, Kevin, you failed yourself. I'm like, I don't get it. You should just give me this C. I mean, you're a professor. You're just sitting up there in front of the class. What is this to you? How big of a deal is this to you to just give me a C? It's nothing compared to what you have and where you are. Professor Baim got offended, and rightly so. He explained it to me this way. He said, listen, he said, I have an EDD, which is like an educationer's professor's equivalency to a PhD, as most of you know. He said, not only am I the first person in my family to get an EDD, and not only am I the first person in my family to graduate college, I'm the first person in my family to graduate high school. And he told me a little bit about his life. He told me how hard he worked to get through college. He worked a job while he put himself through college. He worked in graduate school, and he worked while he did his thesis for his EDD. He earned his spot at the head of that class as a professor. He said, nobody gave me my A's, nor did anyone give me my C's. And he said, I worked harder for some of those C's than I did some of those A's. No one gave me anything. He said, education is my business. This is what I do. And you're asking me to just give you part of what is a big part of me because I like you. He said, that's not how the world works. And I'm using the example he used. Not I'm saying I'm for or against this guy, but this was in the late 90s. He used the example of Donald Trump because he was a big real estate tycoon. And he said, what you're asking me to do here in college would be like somebody who knew Donald Trump going up to Donald Trump and saying, hey, Don, I see you've built quite a real estate empire. You own half of Manhattan. I'd like to go into real estate too, but, I don't really have the time to do all the work that you did to get to where you are. But since, we know each other and we like each other, why don't you give me one of your apartment complexes? Just let me take that over, start running that, that way I get into the real estate business. And I said, Professor Baim, asking you to give me a C is nothing like what you just described. And he says, it is. And so I left. I was upset with Professor Baim. I went partying that night, drinking my beer and hanging out with my girls, telling everybody what Professor Baim said. 9 out of 10 people were like, oh, forget him. What a jerk. Wow, he's greedy. Here he is. He's a professor and he won't just give you a C. He's greedy. But fortunately, and you guys have people like this in your life, 1 out of 10 people that we surround ourselves with are real. These are the 1 out of 10 people who we need to keep ourselves surrounded with, and the other 9 out of 10 we need to just get probably as far away from as the East is from the West. But there was that 1 out of 10 people who told me not what I wanted to hear, but what I needed to hear. And they would say, you know what, Professor Baim was right. I mean, put yourself in his shoes. You see a professor, you see a C as, well, what's this? And they said, you know, look at what Professor Baim went through to get to where he is. And you're kind of asking him to give you a big part of what he worked for so that you don't have to do the work to get there. So I got over it and went back to Professor Baim with a blank sheet of paper and a pen. I said, Professor Baim, make out my daily schedule for me for this next semester. I'm taking your class. I've failed twice. I'm going to do my best to come to class, and I'm going to do my best to kind of change my schedule. Professor Baim sat down with me. He made out the new schedule, and the following semester I had a 3.87 GPA. I had 5 courses. I had 4 A's and 1 B. I got an A in his course. I had an education class that I took for granted. I thought, well, this is the easiest course here, so I'm going to devote the least amount of time to this course, and I got a B. But I had a 3.87, made the dean's list, and I would eventually go on to graduate from college and be the first person in my family to do so. So here I am 20 years later. I can't remember a thing Professor Baim taught me about science, and frankly, and no offense to anybody that I ever had in college, but I have very few memories of any of my other college professors. But Professor Baim sticks out in my mind because Professor Baim kind of laid out a roadmap for success for me that I've followed since. And that's why, loving Atlanta, I'm a morning person. I made myself a morning person. Yesterday was Sunday, and I was talking to a colleague at work, and he was telling me, you know, he's been following the channel. He sees where we're at. He saw that we had a video go viral several weeks ago, and there's a lot more people watching now. And again, thank you to each and every one of you who are watching. And I promise here, I've got a few days left working at this job I hate that makes me miserable, and I'll be out of there. And we're going to get back to planting and homesteading and farming. And we're going to be doing the goats thing, me, my wife, and my son exclusively, because this is who we've been, this is who we will remain. But he said, you know, he said, I have a big appreciation for what you've done. He says, I know you're coming in here and you're working, you know, 8 to 12 hours a day. And for the longest time, you did it 6 days a week and then 7 days a week. He says, I know for the last month or so, you've had a couple days off because you got the note from the VA, and our person in charge was forced by her superiors to honor it. And he said, I'm glad you're quitting because you've got other things to go to. You know, book sales have spiked hugely. So we're going to be okay, folks. And he says, you've worked hard to get here. I'm proud of you. And he said, I never want anything from you. I don't want to do what you're doing. I just want to let you know I'm proud of you. And I thanked him for that. And he said, and he was true, I love doing what I do. I love sitting up here at 5:30, 6 o'clock in the morning and making these videos, but I don't always want to get up and do it. And he told me that. He said, I know you didn't want to get up at 4:30 and 5 o'clock in the morning and make videos of yourself planting pumpkins or digging these huge deep holes for the double till gardening method, spending 2.5 hours of heavy labor in your garden and then coming into work here to work 12 hours a day. He said, but I knew that you wanted to be successful with your outside ventures, and I'm happy to see that you are. Guys, nothing comes easy. We don't find success, and we don't find time. People will often say, well, I wish I could find the time to do that. Professor Baim taught me that we never find time. We make time. And if we're not willing to make the time to do the things we say we want to do, then we really don't want to do them. Okay? If Professor Baim had given me a C because he liked me, the following semester I would have failed a different class. And that professor may or may not have liked me, and they probably wouldn't have given me a C. So I would have been right back where I was before, And I wouldn't have had that roadmap of success that Professor Baim gave me by making me earn my C. And I got an A eventually when I did the work involved. I did better than I thought I could do. If a real estate tycoon in my local area or anybody, if I were to go to them and they gave me an apartment complex because they liked me, and so I could say, oh, look at me, I'm now in the real estate business, it would be just a very short matter of time before I was out of the real estate business, because I don't know anything about the real estate business. And even if I did, even if I studied, even if I read books on real estate, I didn't do the work required to build that real estate business. So it would mean nothing to me. It was a gift. It was something somebody gave me. It would be like somebody, maybe buying me my property and making the payments on it or something like that, or a car. And then when they finally, if they were to come to me and say, you know what, I'm not going to do this for anymore, you need to do it for yourself, I wouldn't have the intestinal fortitude to say, you know what, I really want to keep this thing I have because I don't want to lose it. I'd probably just say, yeah, I'm not going to make the payments anymore. They can come get it. Because it meant nothing. Because I never earned that thing, whatever that thing is. And folks, I'm not trying to come across as bashing people who just want things given to them or have had things given to them, because I don't hate them, I don't loathe them. I stopped hating people a few years ago because I realized it takes as much energy to hate someone as it does to love someone. So why would I give somebody I don't like the same amount of energy that I give to my wife and my son? I'm not going to do it. So I guess I just ignore them and forget them. And once I'm at a point to where I can be away from these folks and get them out of my life, I do, and I never think of them again, because they're not worth the same energy as my wife and my son. But I feel sorry for these folks, because one of the greatest feelings, and I don't know why I'm holding this umbrella, the rain stopped. One of the greatest emotions I've ever experienced is that feeling of achievement that comes from having worked very hard for a very long time to achieve a goal that was important to me. Now, if this was given to me, if I mentioned the other day about reading Stephen King's book on writing, where he says, if reading can't be taught, it can be learned, however, and if you want to be good at it, you've got to read a lot and you got to write a lot. So I spent years in the Philippines reading 10 novels a month at least, and writing 10,000 words a day at least. And again, folks, this is the equivalency of 40 pages in a printed book. I did this for years. So when I finally did achieve some success, it meant so much more. And now, I came back to the U.S. I was able to bring my family with me. We bought this beautiful homestead. It means so much more because I did the work required to do that. If I would have gone to Stephen King, let's say he liked me because we were friends, and I said, Steve, you've done really well. I want to be where you are, but I don't really have the time to do what you did to get here. You wrote this book many years ago, Cujo, the thing about the dog. You've gotten all these bestsellers since, like It and all these things. Why don't you just hand over the copyrights to me for Cujo and let me put my name on the book? That way people will start, reading me, and then after I've got enough people reading Cujo written by me, which was, you did the work to make this book come to life, but they'll start, I can write something in and then they'll read it because they're already, I would have never won the Yahoo Content of the Year award. I would have never had a book that spent 6 months as Amazon's #1 rated novel in customer satisfaction, a ghost novel in the paranormal ghost genre. And I never would have been able to do for my family what I've done for them, and I would not be able to continue to do for my family what I did for them because of the work that we did. My wife, I shared this in a video the other day, worked 8 hours a day for $2 a day in the Philippines so I could write and we could eat. People here in the U.S. have said to me, well, what's your wife do? And I said, well, she stays at home with our son. And they're like, what? She doesn't work? Number one, yes, she does work. An at-home mother being an at-home mother is the most underappreciated job in our society, and it's the most important. And this is just my opinion, my views. But number two, she worked when we were in her country so we could do what we needed to do to get to my country. In her country, she's welcome now. She's not a legal citizen yet. She is here legally, but she's not a citizen yet. She's excited about becoming a citizen, and I'm excited for her. But now I'm doing the work here. She's put in her time. She's done her time. So that's how we're rolling, folks. So loving Atlanta. And again, this wasn't any wasn't meant to be disrespectful towards you, Loving Atlanta, saying, just get up earlier. This is a story about how I became a morning person because, you know, when I followed Professor Baim's roadmap to success, it stuck with me and I kept doing it. And there's been a lot of failures. I've had a lot of failures. I've had a lot of dips. You know, I've spent the last 6 months with a job I didn't want to have, but I had to do it at the time because I needed to make sure I was taking care of my family while we were turning things around with the outside activities like my writing and these things. And we've done that, so now it's time to leave and go back to what I love. And so life's about ups and downs. And what I've found is that usually the ups, when they come back, if we learn the lesson that got us down last time, they last a little bit longer. And if we continue to learn and we don't repeat the same mistakes when we have the downs, they don't last as long. So, but when we're down in that valley, in that dip, that's where some of the most important lessons we'll ever learn about life are to be found. That's where the water and the fresh vegetables and fruits grow. It's not up at the peak where it's kind of rocky and airy. So when we're in the valleys, we've got to pay attention. We've got to learn the lessons. A good friend of mine, John, a new guy at work, came up to me yesterday and he said, hey, remember the little people. And when you're gone, I said, John, there are no little people. And if you think you're right, and you're the little person. He said, man, that's deep. And I said, John, I've got a confession. 6 months ago, I didn't necessarily think that way. I always had for years, but I kind of forgot because I was at that peak. Well, the universe has a way of reminding us of things, and if we forget lessons, it'll come by and donk us in the head with the hammer, and we have to go back and repeat the course in life. And I had to go back and repeat Professor Baim's course a couple of times. And by doing so, the lesson finally stuck. I got my A and I didn't have to go back. So that's what I try to do through life. So thanks for joining us here this morning for another morning ramble. If you got anything at all out of this, please subscribe to our channel. I want to thank everybody who is. We're just clicking away at 1,000 new subscribers a day. You know, it took us a year and a half to get our first 1,000 subscribers, but we kept clicking away, doing the work we knew needed to be done to get there. And now we're there, and now we're getting 1,000 a day. And I thank you so much. Obviously, you guys are clicking like, you're clicking share, and you keep coming back, which is what is most important to us. So I'm gonna give you a beautiful parting shot of the homestead like I always do when I have these little rambles. There's my towel I dry my chair off with. I don't know if you can see them or not, but the chickens are down there. And we will see you guys next time with more.